I was halfway through my morning coffee when I saw the trees falling. Not branches. Whole trees. The cracking echoed like thunder across the ridge, and for a second I thought maybe a storm had hit. But as I stepped onto the old dirt trail behind my cabin, the same one my grandfather carved 60 years ago, I saw the truth. There were machines. Bulldozers. Backhoes. Survey flags lining the clearing like veins on a map no one asked me to approve. And men in bright vests barking into radios like they owned the place. Except they didn't. I did. My name's Sarah Whitmore. I'm a forestry engineer by trade and a stubborn granddaughter by blood. This land, 60 acres of protected woodland tucked behind the mountain range outside Ashridge, has been in my family for 3 generations. Passed down like a sacred secret. Preserved, not parceled. So you can imagine how it felt to see a bulldozer crush through a line of old-growth pines my grandfather once called our cathedral. I stormed down the trail, boots sinking into wet earth, heart pounding. I shouted as I approached the first group of workers. "Hey! Who gave you permission to be on this property?" A man in sunglasses looked up, mildly irritated. "You'll need to talk to the site supervisor." He gestured toward a woman in a crisp gray blazer, standing on a temporary platform made of plywood and arrogance. She didn't look like she belonged in the woods. Her heels were impractical, her expression worse. "Are you in charge here?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. She didn't look up from her tablet. "Ma'am, this site is under development by Westbrook Communities. The land was cleared for residential expansion by Ashridge County. Phase 1 begins today." My stomach dropped. "No, it wasn't. This land is mine. My name is Sarah Whitmore. I hold the deed. I've lived here since my father passed. This is private property." She finally looked at me, and I'll never forget her tone. Dismissive. Like I was a confused child interrupting a meeting. "According to public records, this parcel was reclassified last year due to non-residential zoning lapse. It's now designated as transitional use land and approved for housing. If you believe there's an error, you're welcome to file an appeal." I stared at her in disbelief. "You can't just bulldoze someone's legacy because of a paperwork trick." Her expression didn't change. "This development isn't stopping." And then she walked away. Behind her, the machines kept roaring. Trees kept falling. And deep in my bones, I knew something was very wrong. But she had no idea that this forest held more than trees. It held a clause. A trap. One my grandfather buried so deep, not even the county knew it was there. Yet, by the time I made it back to the cabin, the sound of chainsaws had already begun to echo like a funeral dirge through the trees. I didn't even stop to take off my boots. I went straight for the filing cabinet where I kept every document that mattered: birth certificates, tax records, and most importantly the deed. I found it. Original, signed, notarized. Tucked inside a plastic sleeve with my father's handwriting on a sticky note. "Never let this land be touched. Not without a fight." The next morning, I marched into the Ashridge County Clerk's office, deed in hand. The receptionist barely looked up. "I need to speak with someone about a property classification error. My land is being developed without my consent." She handed me a clipboard. "Fill this out and someone will call you." "I don't need a call," I said firmly. "I need action. Right now." Her eyes narrowed as she scanned the form I shoved back at her. "Whitmore? Let me check something." She clicked through a few screens, then shrugged. "According to our system, Parcel 46B was reclassified as transitional use in last year's zoning update. Multiple notices were sent by mail. You didn't respond." "Because I never received them," I said, my voice rising. "I've lived there every day for the past 9 years. Not one letter. No call. No in-person visit. Nothing. Sometimes mail gets lost," she said, as if that explained everything. I stood there in stunned silence. Next stop was the Ashridge Planning Commission. I showed them the deed. They glanced at it, then pointed me to the Legal Affairs Division. I waited 3 hours to see a clerk who, after skimming my file, told me bluntly, "You'll need to settle this through litigation." Litigation? As in, get a lawyer. So I did. Or tried. 3 different firms heard my story. All 3 said the same thing, in slightly different flavors of polite refusal. Taking on Westbrook Communities and their HOA legal branch is a risky case. They have in-house counsel and insurance that would drag this out for years. We're not currently taking property boundary disputes. Translation? You can't afford this fight. By the end of the week, 12 more acres of forest had been leveled. The foundations of 3 homes were already being poured. Concrete spread like infection into soil that had once been untouched for generations. I started standing on the ridge at sunset, just watching. Not yelling anymore. Just watching. On the 3rd day, I noticed her. Jessica, the same woman from the platform. HOA Director, Westbrook Communities. Now wearing sunglasses and a smug little smirk. She saw me standing there. She waved. It wasn't a friendly wave. It was the kind you give to someone who lost before they even stepped onto the field. She called out across the distance, voice sharp and sweet. "Hope you're enjoying the view, Ms. Whitmore. We'll be breaking ground on the community center next week." A few nearby workers laughed. I didn't move. Didn't speak. I just stared back and let the wind carry the weight of everything I didn't say. But inside I was screaming. I wasn't just fighting for trees. I was fighting for memory. For principle. For my grandfather's promise. And somewhere, deep under the noise and chaos, a thought began to form, slow and dangerous. They were building the wrong thing on the wrong land. And they were going to regret it. The night after Jessica's mocking wave, I couldn't sleep. I lay on the old sofa in the cabin's front room, staring at the ceiling fans spinning slowly in the dark. The hum of construction still echoed faintly in the distance, even after midnight. It was like the forest itself was grieving, creaking under the weight of betrayal. That's when I remembered the safe. It was a detail that had lived quietly in the back of my mind, a half-buried memory of my grandfather's voice. "If anything ever happens, if someone tries to take the land, look inside the old safe behind the wood stove. You'll know what to do." At the time, I thought he was just being old. Paranoid. Now? I was praying he was right. I moved the stove with shaking hands, coughing as ash and soot dusted the floor. Behind it, embedded in the wall like a relic from another century, was a square iron panel with a rusted keyhole. I still had the key. It was on the same chain that held my grandfather's dog tags. Inside were 3 things. A weathered envelope sealed in wax. A hand-drawn survey map of the land from 1952. And the original property deed, typed, signed, notarized, and stamped with something I'd never paid attention to before. Protective Use Covenant enacted, 1961. I sat at the kitchen table with a flashlight, carefully unfolding the documents. My hands were trembling, but my eyes scanned every line like they were oxygen. And there it was. Buried near the end of the covenant, in plain legalese. No structure, facility, or improvement shall be constructed on the described land parcel without the express, written, and notarized consent of the rightful landholder or direct heir. Any such unauthorized improvements shall, by covenant and with full legal standing, become the sole and permanent property of said landholder upon completion, with no obligation of compensation or legal remedy owed to the unauthorized builder. I read it again. And again. Then I laughed. Out loud. It was the kind of laugh that came from weeks of feeling powerless, finally cracking open under the weight of sudden hope. My grandfather hadn't been paranoid. He'd been prepared. He hadn't just protected the land, he'd set a trap for anyone arrogant enough to take it. A legal time bomb, triggered not by confrontation, but by construction. And Westbrook Communities had just lit the fuse. The next morning, I drove an hour to see the only lawyer I trusted not to sell me out. Marshall Green, a semi-retired land use attorney who'd once helped my dad settle a boundary issue with the State Park Commission. He wore suspenders, smelled like pipe tobacco, and didn't suffer fools. By noon, He'd finished reading the entire covenant twice. He looked up from the paper slowly, eyebrows raised. Well, Miss Whitmore, your grandfather may have had fewer teeth than legal training, but this is a masterpiece. So it's real? It holds up? Oh, it holds, he said, tapping the document. This was filed, recorded, and never revoked. Still legally binding. Which means every square foot they build becomes yours. I sat back, barely able to breathe. So, I should stop them? File a cease and desist? Marshall smiled, a slow and dangerous kind of smile. You could. Or. He leaned forward, voice dropping. You let them keep building. I didn't file the cease and desist. I didn't call the county again. I didn't even show up on site the next day to argue. Instead, I disappeared. Not physically, but from their radar. And in the silence I left behind, I began preparing. The first thing I did was buy 4 motion-activated trail cameras, the kind hunters use for tracking game. I hid them in birdhouses and tree hollows at the edge of the property, angled perfectly to catch every truck, every load of concrete, every nail driven into what was still, legally, my land. I upgraded my phone plan to unlimited storage and started a private video log. Each morning, I filmed the progress from a ridge overlooking the site, narrating everything I saw with the detachment of a war correspondent. Day 11. I said one morning, camera in hand. Lot 14 foundation complete. Framing on Lot 15 underway. No permits posted on site. No signage indicating zoning compliance. Then I found James, an independent surveyor who didn't flinch when I told him I needed historical boundary confirmation. We hiked the perimeter together, him dragging equipment through mud and fallen brush. After 2 days, he handed me a stamped report with one sentence that made my heart race. The original property boundary and current development footprint do not align. The encroachment totals 58 acres. They hadn't just miscalculated. They'd built nearly the entire development inside my family forest. By mid-April, the project had a name, Forest Hill Meadows. The sign went up right where my grandmother's favorite elm tree used to stand. Carved into polished stone, it read, A Premier Woodland Community, by Westbrook Communities. It was nauseating. Marketing brochures started showing up online. Glossy photos of folk craftsman homes nestled between what they called legacy timber and protected green space. Never mind that the legacy timber had been bulldozed, and the green space was a drainage ditch. The price? Starting at $420,000. All of it built on stolen soil. I said nothing. Not to them. Not yet. Instead, I documented. Meticulously. I kept a daily log. I downloaded real estate listings as they appeared. I saved every HOA newsletter, every county update, every drone video Westbrook proudly shared online. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about building a perfect case, one nail, one frame, one driveway at a time. By June, the model homes were complete. The clubhouse was under construction. Workers paved roads with names like Whispering Grove Lane and Hickory Bend Drive. Every day, another slab of concrete replaced another patch of moss, another raccoon den, another memory. I watched from the ridge. Same spot. Same camera. Sometimes Jessica came out, now in branded jackets and designer sunglasses, pointing proudly at her homes during guided tours. She had no idea. She was building me a retirement village. One lawsuit at a time. And every board nailed down, every porch light installed, brought me one step closer to springing the trap. By early July, the first families began to move in. SUVs rolled through the freshly paved entrance. Children ran across immaculate lawns that had, just a few months earlier, been thick with ferns and fox tracks. Porch lights flicked on. Barbecue smoke curled into the air. Forest Hill Meadows was alive now. And I felt sick to my stomach. It was one thing to watch greedy developers pour money into a mistake. To let bulldozers chew through roots and concrete rise where silence used to live. It was another thing entirely to see kids riding bikes in circles around what used to be a blackberry thicket. To hear a woman's laugh drift through my trees as she unpacked dishes in a kitchen that legally, unknowingly, was mine. They were innocent. Every single person moving into those homes was a victim of Westbrook's arrogance, just like I was. They weren't the ones who cut corners, forged reclassification reports, or ignored ownership records. And yet, if I pulled the trigger on this legal bomb, they'd be the ones caught in the blast. I stared at the folder on my desk, the one labeled Phase 1 Evidence. It was over 2 inches thick now. I could file tomorrow. Stop everything. Win. But at what cost? That night I called Marshall. He picked up on the second ring. Whitmore. Thought I might be hearing from you around now. They're moving in, Marshall. Families. Kids. Golden retrievers. I feel like a damn predator waiting in the woods. He was silent for a moment. Then, Sarah, who poured the foundations. Westbrook. Who sold the homes knowing they didn't own the land? Westbrook. Then don't you dare carry guilt for their decisions. You didn't build this mess, they did. And if you let them get away with it now, they'll do it again. To someone without the deed. Without the claws. Without the fight in them. I sat on the porch as he spoke, watching the distant glow of porch lights shimmer through the treetops. They're the ones hurting these families, Sarah. Not you. He was right. Legally. Logically. But that didn't make it any easier. So I made a decision. I would wait. I would finish gathering every piece of proof, every document, every timestamped photo. But what do you think? Comment, yes. If Sarah should have stepped in early. Comment, no. If letting them build was the right move. But when the time came to act, I would do it carefully, not to destroy lives, but to hold Westbrook accountable. And maybe, just maybe, show people that justice didn't have to come with a wrecking ball. Sometimes, it could come with a boundary line and a warning. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is make sure it never happens again. The invitation came in a glossy white envelope, hand-delivered to my mailbox like some kind of insult. Forest Hill Meadows, Grand Opening Celebration. Printed in gold script beneath it. Join us for a ribbon-cutting ceremony with the mayor, county officials, and the Westbrook Communities team as we unveil Ashridge's premier woodland development. I read it twice, then slid it into the same folder as the survey maps and deed copies. The trap was set. August 14th, high noon. A Friday, because of course it was. The clubhouse lawn had been transformed into something out of a lifestyle magazine. White tents, catering tables, a string quartet playing Vivaldi under the pines that hadn't been bulldozed. Realtors in heels walked couples past the model homes, smiling like this was Disneyland. I stayed at the edge of the crowd, unnoticed in jeans and a faded ball cap. Jessica stood at the podium, now in full CO mode. She wore a white blazer, a name tag that sparkled under the sun, and the same smug confidence I'd seen the day she dismissed me at the Ridge. Welcome, everyone, she began, her voice amplified over a sound system that echoed into what was left of my forest. Today, we celebrate more than just beautiful homes. We celebrate vision, transformation, community. There was applause. Too much. Forest Hill Meadows, she continued, represents our commitment to responsible development, sustainable growth, and creating neighborhoods where families can thrive for generations. I waited. Let her finish. Let her bury herself in the script a little deeper. And now, she said with a grand gesture, I'd like to invite Mayor Collins and our partners to join me as we officially open Ashridge's newest jewel. She stepped aside. Someone handed her oversized scissors. That was my cue. I walked forward, slow but steady, cutting through the sea of lawn chairs and hors d'oeuvres. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Jessica looked up, recognition flaring behind her eyes. Ms. Whitmore, she said into the mic, smile twitching. I wasn't aware you'd be joining us. I didn't take the microphone. I didn't need to. Instead, I raised a manila envelope above my head and spoke clearly. My name is Sarah Whitmore. My family has owned this land for 3 generations. This development was built illegally, without consent, without authorization, on private property. A ripple went through the crowd. Jessica stepped toward me, voice tight. This is not the place. This is exactly the place. I interrupted. And now is exactly the time. I opened the envelope and pulled out the deed, copies of the covenant clause highlighted, notarized, and signed. This provision, I said, holding it up, was filed with Ashridge County in 1961. It is still legally binding. It states that any structure built without permission on this land becomes the sole property of the rightful owner. Which is me. Dead silence. Then, that's absurd. Someone snapped. A man in a dark suit, Westbrook's lead counsel, judging by the panic in his eyes, snatched the paper from my hands and began scanning. His lips moved as he read. Jessica's face turned pale. Reporters started recording. Flashbulbs popped. The mayor cleared his throat. We need to review this. I've already done that, I said. So have 3 attorneys. The county has the original document on file. Every home here, every street, this clubhouse, it's all mine now. A reporter shouted, Is this true? Can she claim the entire subdivision? The lawyer looked up, voice dry and broken. If the covenant holds, yes. Jessica dropped the scissors. People were on their phones. Residents were whispering, panicking. One man turned to his wife and muttered, We just moved in last week. I turned to the crowd. I don't want your homes, I said calmly. But I do want justice. Then I walked away, leaving Westbrook Communities to untangle the $1 million knot they had tied with their own arrogance. Imagine this was your land. Comment 1 for Sarah's calm, strategic justice. Comment 2 if you'd have taken them down immediately. By the next morning, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. First it was reporters. Then residents. Then lawyers. By noon, a number I didn't recognize lit up my screen with a simple label. Westbrook Communities, Legal Department. I let it go to voicemail. Marshall and I sat in his office that afternoon, drinking black coffee and watching the coverage loop on the local news. Drone footage of Forest Hill Meadows, side by side with a freeze frame of me holding the deed in front of a stunned crowd. The anchor's voice called it a developer's worst nightmare. That's one way to put it. I muttered. Marshall grinned. They'll be calling with offers today. They did. By that evening, I was sitting across from Westbrook's legal counsel, same guy who had looked like he'd swallowed his tie at the ribbon cutting. He started with charm. Ms. Whitmore, we'd like to resolve this amicably. For everyone's sake. Then he slid a folder across the table. Offer $3 million. Lump sum. I didn't touch it. That wouldn't cover the cost of paving 1 cul-de-sac, I said. He cleared his throat. It's a good faith effort. The market value of the land prior to development, plus a generous bonus. Marshall chuckled from beside me. You think she wants a bonus for losing her forest? The lawyer tried again. Look, we're trying to minimize disruption to residents. This could spiral into lawsuits, countersuits, panic in the housing market. Should have thought of that before you built an entire neighborhood on someone else's land. I interrupted. He leaned forward. What exactly do you want? I met his eyes. The full value. Every home, every lot, every street, clubhouse, and amenity, minus a modest deduction for bulk settlement. He blinked. That's over $25 million. That's what you owe. The room went cold. They left. 2 days passed. Then came the next offer, $8 million. We didn't answer. A week later, $12.5 million and legal indemnity for Westbrook. Still no. They started to sweat. Residents were filing claims. Local news was picking it up daily. Someone had created a Reddit thread. We bought a house, turns out we don't own it. The thread had over 10,000 upvotes. Then came the final meeting. We sat in a private conference room downtown, 10 people around a glossy walnut table. The Westbrook president himself showed up, tan, expensive, exhausted. He didn't waste time. "We'll settle for $17 million, he said. "Clubhouse and 8 unsold homes included. We'll cover all deed correction costs. You sign today, we walk away." I looked at Marshall. He gave me a single, slow nod. I turned back to the president. "At one condition, you issue a public apology. Full page. Local and regional papers." He hesitated. Then nodded. "Fine." And just like that, it was done. $17 million. 8 brand new homes. And 1 community clubhouse, built by greed, inherited by justice. Jessica? Gone. Quietly removed from the board. Her photo vanished from Westbrook's website within days. No fanfare. No farewell post. 3 other executives stepped down within the month. And me? I went home. To the ridge. To the trees that hadn't been flattened. For the first time in nearly a year, I slept through the night. Not because it was over, but because I'd won. The money changed everything. But not in the way people expected. I didn't buy a sports car. I didn't move to the coast. I didn't bulldoze the neighborhood in some grand act of vengeance. Instead, I walked the ridge one last time, alone, with only the quiet hum of cicadas and the soft rustle of the trees that remained. That's when I made my decision. 30 days after the settlement cleared, I founded the Whitmore Conservation Trust, a nonprofit dedicated to protecting and restoring private forest lands across the county. I donated 10 acres of untouched forest behind the ridge as the first official nature reserve under the Trust's banner. Then I turned my attention to the clubhouse. What was once a monument to corporate vanity became the beating heart of something far more meaningful. We stripped out the marketing posters and replaced them with maps of native plant species. The game room became a classroom. The bar was transformed into a library stocked with books on ecology, sustainability, and indigenous land stewardship. We renamed it the Evergreen Center. Every weekend, we hosted free programs for local kids, tree identification walks, wildlife photography, composting workshops. Families from the surrounding neighborhoods came too, some of them the very residents who'd once unknowingly bought stolen homes. No one held a grudge. Most were grateful. They'd been lied to. Manipulated. But instead of tearing down what had been built, we repurposed it, rooted it in something honest. I sold 4 of the 8 homes I'd kept to teachers and park rangers at below-market prices. The other 4? I offered as temporary housing for wildfire evacuees and families in crisis. No rent. No contracts. Just a safe place to land. And as for me? I became the unofficial warden of Forest Hill. Not because I claimed power, but because people started coming to me when things needed fixing. I'd gone from being the woman they ignored to the one they trusted. Some nights, I still stand at the ridge and look out at the homes scattered through the trees. And I smile. Because what began as theft ended as something worth protecting. Just like my grandfather intended. Know someone who's dealt with a nightmare HOA? Share this story with them, then hit subscribe for more HOA Karen stories just like this one. In the end, this story isn't just about land, or even about revenge. It's about legacy, integrity, and the quiet power of standing your ground when everything seems stacked against you. Sarah didn't just protect her family's forest, she honored it. She didn't seek destruction, she sought restoration. And that's the lesson we often forget: justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's patient. Sometimes it's strategic. And sometimes it looks like a woman turning a developer's mistake into a center for learning and healing. In a world where shortcuts, greed, and bureaucracy often win, this story reminds us that truth, when rooted deep enough, cannot be erased. It may take time. It may demand sacrifice. But when you carry forward the values of those who came before you, with courage, clarity, and purpose, you can reshape even the ugliest wrongs into something that serves the greater good. So hold your ground. Protect what matters. And never underestimate the impact one person can have, especially when they know exactly where the boundary line is.